You think you're an INFJ because you're sensitive, you care about people, and you feel misunderstood. I'm here to tell you that's not enough. Those are stereotypes, and if that's all you have, you're probably not an INFJ at all. In fact, you might be an ENFP who loves connecting with people but can't stick to long-term plans. You could be an ISFJ who actually prefers concrete details over abstract patterns. Or maybe you're an INTJ, who's convinced yourself you're more feeling-oriented than you really are. Here's the reality check. Up to 16% of people online claim to be INFJs, but the actual percentage is around 1 to 3% of the population. That means most of you watching this video right now are mistyped. And when you're trying to understand yourself through the wrong lens, you're missing out on insights that could actually help you grow. The INFJ isn't about being rare or mystical or special. It's about having a specific cognitive wiring that creates predictable patterns in how you process information and make decisions. And today, we're going to test whether you actually have that wiring. Before we start, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our weekly deep dives into the world of personality types. And if you are looking to achieve a deeper understanding of yourself and your personality type, click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test. The core of the INFJ: Introverted Intuition, Extraverted Feeling, Introverted Thinking, Extraverted Sensing. Before we dive into the signs, let's talk about what actually makes someone an INFJ. It's not about being introverted, sensitive, or caring about people. Those are surface-level traits that could describe dozens of personality types. Their cognitive function stack defines the real INFJ, and this is where most people get it wrong. The INFJ's dominant function is introverted intuition. This isn't just being intuitive in the general sense. Introverted intuition is specifically about pattern recognition and future-focused thinking. It's constantly asking, where's this heading? And what does this mean in the bigger picture? Real INFJs live in this space of long-term vision and convergent thinking. Their auxiliary function is extraverted feeling. This isn't just being empathetic. Extraverted feeling is about reading the emotional climate of a room and naturally adjusting to create harmony. It's externally focused emotional intelligence that prioritizes group dynamics over personal feelings. Then comes introverted thinking, which provides logical analysis and internal consistency. This is what helps INFJs evaluate whether their intuitive insights actually make sense. Finally, there's extraverted sensing, which is their weakest function. This shows up as occasional bursts of spontaneity, but generally a disconnect from immediate sensory experiences. Here's what most people miss. These functions work together in a specific way. The introverted intuition creates the vision. The extroverted feeling considers how it affects people. The introverted thinking checks if it's logically sound, and the extroverted sensing provides occasional reality checks. If you don't have this exact pattern, you're not an INFJ, regardless of how rare or intuitive you think you are. Sign 1. You lack deep, long-term vision. The Introverted Intuition Test. The first significant sign you're not a real INFJ is if you don't naturally think in long-term patterns and convergent insights. Dominant introverted intuition isn't just about having good intuition or being able to read people. It's a specific way of processing information that focuses on where things are heading over time. Real INFJs are constantly synthesizing information into unified visions of the future. They'll meet someone and immediately start forming impressions about where that person's life is going based on subtle patterns they've picked up. They'll look at a situation and instinctively know how it's likely to unfold, not because they're psychic, but because their brains are wired to connect the dots across time. This shows up in how they approach major life decisions. A real INFJ doesn't just think about what they want right now. They're thinking about how their choices today will affect their life 5 or 10 years down the road. They have an internal compass that's always pointing toward their long-term vision, even if they can't always articulate it. Suppose you find yourself constantly changing directions, jumping from one interest to another without any underlying thread connecting them, or making decisions based primarily on immediate circumstances. In that case, you're probably not operating from dominant introverted intuition. Real INFJs might take time to figure out their path, but once they do, there's a consistency to their choices that reflects their underlying vision. Another way this shows up is in conversation. Real INFJs will often make connections that seem to come out of nowhere, but actually reflect deep pattern recognition. They'll link something you said today to something you mentioned months ago, or they'll predict how a situation will develop based on subtle cues others missed. This isn't about being intelligent or observant. It's about having a brain that naturally processes information through the lens of long-term patterns and implications. Sign 2. You don't prioritize harmony. The Extraverted Feeling test. The second sign you're not a real INFJ is if you don't instinctively prioritize group harmony and emotional climate. Auxiliary extroverted feeling isn't just about being nice or caring about people's feelings. It's about being naturally attuned to the emotional dynamics of any group you're in and feeling compelled to maintain balance. Real INFJs walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional temperature. They notice when someone's feeling left out, when there's tension between two people, or when the energy is off. More importantly, they feel responsible for doing something about it. They're the ones who will redirect a conversation that's getting too heated, include someone who's being ignored, or find ways to smooth over conflicts. This isn't about being a people pleaser. Real INFJs aren't trying to make everyone happy because they want to be liked. They're responding to their extroverted feeling function, which experiences group discord as genuinely uncomfortable. When the emotional climate is off, they feel it in their body. It's like being in a room with nails on a chalkboard. If you find yourself frequently speaking your mind without considering how it affects the group dynamic, or if you're comfortable with conflict and tension in social situations, you're probably not operating from auxiliary extroverted feeling. Real INFJs might have strong opinions, but they'll usually find diplomatic ways to express them. They're thinking about how their words will land and what effect they'll have on the overall group energy. Another telltale sign is how you handle criticism or negative feedback in group settings. Real INFJs will often absorb criticism that's directed at the group as a whole, even when it's not specifically about them. Their extroverted feeling function makes them feel responsible for the group's well-being, so group criticism feels personal. If you can detach from group dynamics and focus purely on your individual experience, you're not an INFJ. Sign 3. You avoid self-correction and logic. The Introverted Thinking test. The third sign you're not a real INFJ is if you don't naturally engage in internal, logical analysis or self-correction. Tertiary introverted thinking isn't just about being innovative or analytical. It's about having an internal system that constantly evaluates whether your thoughts and beliefs actually make sense, even when those thoughts come from your dominant intuition. Real INFJs have this interesting relationship with their own insights. Their introverted intuition will generate powerful hunches about people, situations, and future outcomes. But then their introverted thinking kicks in, poking holes in those insights. It's asking questions like, wait, is this actually logical? Or, am I missing something here? Or, does this conclusion really follow from the evidence I have? This creates what appears to be self-doubt from the outside, but it's actually intellectual rigor. A real INFJ will have a strong intuitive sense about something, then spend time analyzing whether that sense is actually justified. They're not just going with their gut. They're putting their gut through a logical stress test. If you stick rigidly to your first impressions or intuitive hits without questioning them, you're probably not operating from tertiary introverted thinking. Real INFJs are constantly refining their understanding as new information comes in. They'll change their minds about people or situations when the evidence doesn't support their initial assessment. This also shows up in how they handle being wrong. Real INFJs don't like being bad, but they have a grudging respect for accuracy. When someone points out a flaw in their reasoning, their introverted thinking function will actually appreciate the correction, even if their ego doesn't. They'll go back and examine where their thinking went off track because they genuinely want to understand reality correctly. Another way this manifests is in their decision-making process. Real INFJs don't blindly follow their values or vision. They're constantly checking whether their approach makes logical sense. They'll have a strong sense of what they want to do based on their introverted intuition and extroverted feeling. Still, they'll analyze the practical implications, consider potential problems, and adjust their strategy accordingly. You'll also notice this in how they communicate their ideas. Real INFJs often sound tentative when they're sharing insights, not because they lack confidence, but because their introverted thinking is simultaneously evaluating their own thoughts as they speak. They'll say things like, "I could be wrong about this, but," or "This might not make sense, but I keep thinking." They're inviting logical scrutiny because their introverted thinking function values accuracy over being right. Sign 4. You are highly focused on immediate sensory details, the Extraverted Sensing test. The fourth sign you're not a real INFJ is if you're naturally focused on immediate sensory experiences and present moment details. Inferior extroverted sensing means that, in real life, INFJs typically struggle to stay grounded in the here and now. They're much more comfortable in the world of ideas, patterns, and future possibilities than in immediate physical reality. Real INFJs often seem disconnected from their immediate environment. They'll walk into a room and not notice what color the walls are, or they'll have a conversation with you while completely missing noticeable changes in your appearance. This isn't because they don't care. Their attention is naturally drawn inward to patterns and meanings rather than outward to sensory details. This shows up practically in how they handle routine tasks. Real INFJs often struggle with keeping track of their keys, remembering to eat regular meals, and noticing when their environment is messy. They're so focused on their internal processing that they lose track of basic physical needs and immediate surroundings. Suppose you're someone who's naturally detail-oriented. In that case, who notices changes in your environment immediately, who's good at multitasking in busy environments, or who feels energized by sensory experiences like concerts or busy social gatherings, you're probably not an INFJ. Real INFJs find those kinds of environments overwhelming because their inferior extroverted sensing can't efficiently process all that immediate sensory input. The flip side is that when real INFJs do engage their extroverted sensing, it often comes out in intense bursts. They might suddenly decide to rearrange their entire living space, go on an impromptu adventure, or become temporarily obsessed with a physical activity. But these bursts are usually followed by periods in which they retreat into their internal world to process what they experienced. Sign 5. You don't experience door slams or need solitude. The fifth sign you're not a real INFJ is if you don't experience the famous door slam or have a genuine need for extended solitude. Real INFJs have particular patterns around relationships and energy management that come directly from their cognitive function stack. The INFJ door slam isn't just about cutting people off when you're angry. It's a specific response that happens when someone repeatedly violates the INFJ's core values or emotional boundaries. The introverted intuition and extraverted feeling combination creates deep investment in relationships. Still, when those relationships become consistently harmful, the introverted thinking function eventually concludes that the relationship is logically unsustainable. The door slam is the result of this internal analysis, not an emotional outburst. Real INFJs also need significant solitude to function correctly. This isn't just about being introverted or needing to recharge. It's about needing time for their introverted intuition to process all the patterns and information they've absorbed. Without this processing time, they become overwhelmed and can't access their natural insights. If you're energized by constant social interaction, or don't understand why someone would need to cut off a relationship completely, you're probably not operating from the INFJ cognitive stack. Understanding your actual personality type isn't about fitting into a prestigious category. It's about recognizing how your mind actually works, so you can make better decisions and build on your real strengths. If these signs resonate, explore other types, such as ISFJ, INFP, or ENFJ. Your authentic type will feel like coming home to yourself, not like trying to fit into someone else's description. If you want to continue the journey to understanding yourself, or an INFJ in your life, click either of the following videos, where we continue to unlock the secrets of the INFJ personality type.